Coming up on Lawmakers, the late Congressman Charlie Norwood is memorialized by the House. The Up and Out of Poverty Now organization rallies at the Capitol for an increase in Georgia's minimum wage. And a measure that would compel a woman seeking an abortion to view an ultrasound of her fetus passes out of Senate committee. Those stories and more are coming up next.
This is Lawmakers, your source for all the news from under the Gold Dome. Here are your anchors, Wandy Lawson and David Zelski.
Good evening. Also on tonight's program, members of Georgia's business community hear from the presiding officers of both chambers.
And we talk about this week at the Georgia Legislature with Tom Crawford of CapitolImpact.com. But our lead story tonight, legislative business at the Capitol takes a pause as the House memorializes Congressman Charlie Norwood. Although the Senate opted not to come into the chamber for Legislative Day 21, the House took one vote today. Unanimous passage of House Resolution 50 honoring the life of Congressman Charlie Norwood was preceded by a tribute.
When the Speaker called me and we talked about this, he said, "You think we ought to go ahead and do what we plan to do and go to work and pass this resolution?" He said, "What do you think Charlie would have said?" And I said, "Charlie would have said, you boys go get your work done," because that's what kind of person that he was.
The quality of the office holder is reflected in the quality of the staff that they choose to serve them and serve their constituency. Having said that, I can tell you that judging Charlie Norwood by the staff, he truly was a dedicated public servant.
We might not be sitting here today in the majority if it hadn't been for Charlie. When the Democrats had rendered us pretty bad, as DuBose pointed out in a meeting one time, and knocked us down from 76 to 71, I went to Charlie for help. And Charlie made sure that we got a hand up, not a handout.
Let today be a day where we tell him goodbye. Those who have ambitions, I hope you will keep them quiet for a little while longer, because I've been really disappointed over the last few days by a few folks. Because, folks, this is a tough business, but human life is fragile. And when human life ends, respect that life.
I think Charlie Norwood probably is known for a lot of things, but the Patient Bill of Rights may be his legacy. Because he said, you know what? Patients ought to have rights. How ironic that the last few years in life, he was a patient, a cancer treatment patient.
Mr. Speaker, I would move that this House waive the roll call vote, that House Resolution 50 be adopted by acclamation, and the journals would reflect unanimous approval of House Resolution 50.
Is there objection to the gentleman's motion? Is there objection? Chair is none. It's so ordered.
By 2 o'clock, many state officials were in Augusta for Congressman Norwood's funeral.
Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord.
Oh, sweet the sound.
Some of Georgia's low-wage earners converged upon the state capitol today for the 27th Annual Poor People's Day. Lawmaker Sandra Parrish joins us now with more. Sandra.
David, organizers of today's event say that 672,000 Georgians would benefit from raising the minimum wage from $5.15 an hour to $7.25 an hour, and they don't want to wait on Congress to do it.
We ask the governor to put low-wage workers on his sunny-do list. And support decreasing Georgia's minimum wage.
Senate Bill 13 would raise Georgia's minimum wage to $6.20 an hour and then increase that to $7.25 by next January. Each year following, it would receive a cost of living increase.
We all know that it's a travesty to, in fact, have a situation in which people make only $5.15 an hour, and we need to bring the state along into the 21st century and to try to increase that amount up to certainly a minimum of something like $7 plus per hour. We know that the cost of everything has risen tremendously in the last decade, but yet the minimum wage has continued to remain the same.
We cannot afford to not pass this bill on minimum wage. So we need to make sure that this is on the Sonny Perdue list, and this is the senator's first priority, is to make sure this goes through the Senate.
Raise the minimum wage! Raise the minimum wage! Raise the minimum wage!
We had families all over the state that are working 40 hours a week and are still eligible for food stamps.
Right.
It's a shame. They're hardworking people. Right. These are the people in our society that are trying their best to do the right thing, and we're penalizing them by not paying them what they're worth.
Currently, Congress, now controlled by Democrats, is considering raising the federal minimum wage to $7.25 an hour.
The federal minimum wage laws, in so many ways, contradict what the states can do. Even though Georgia has its own minimum wage system and the statutes here allow us to fluctuate, there is no consistency in terms of federal minimum wage as it relates to what states can do. We could have a higher minimum wage than the feds, but this is something that we have to do in order to raise the minimum wage in Georgia.
Senate Bill 13 by Senator Robert Brown remains in committee, with as many people saying it has little chance of passing this session. Reporting from the Senate chambers, I'm Sandra Parrish for Lawmakers.
The Georgia Chamber of Commerce opposes legislation allowing employees to keep guns in their cars on company property. A bill that would allow that passed the House this week, and the Chamber wants to stop it before it becomes law. Leaders of the Georgia Chamber talked about that and other legislative priorities today during their inaugural Georgia Chamber Day. Lawmakers Jesse Freeman now joins us from the Capitol with more. Jesse.
Well, and Wanda, the Georgia Chamber is a large and powerful lobbying group, and nothing shows that more than the list of speakers they heard from in the appropriations room this morning. Despite needing to leave today for Congressman Charlie Norwood's funeral, Lieutenant Governor Cagle and House Speaker Glenn Richardson both came to speak and to listen. The Georgia Chamber says it wants to get rid of the energy tax on businesses, and what the Chamber wants, it usually gets.
It is significant, and I will tell you, last year, for instance, there was not a single piece of legislation that passed the Georgia General Assembly that the Georgia Chamber was opposed to. If we took a standing position in opposition to that bill, there's not a single bill that passed.
After the Chamber laid out their agenda, leaders of both chambers in the legislature talked about their goals to make Georgia a more business-friendly state.
It really is about education, because you can have as many jobs as imaginable, but if you don't have the workforce available to take those jobs, then we're really at a disadvantage. And I believe fundamentally that a one-size-fits-all educational system is not what we need to be focused on. What we need to be focused on is allowing communities to be back in charge of education.
The really big thing that I'm looking forward to is a comprehensive review of our tax policy in Georgia. And I intend to at least get a measure moved forward and get a vote. I've been beat before, and I may get defeated again, but I'm not going to stop going forward. It's time that we look at a comprehensive review of Georgia's tax policy, simplify it, and get something that everybody in the country says, do you hear what they do in Georgia?
And Speaker Richardson has hired economist Arthur Laffer to help him take a look at Georgia's tax code. An attempt at a complete overhaul is not expected this year, but study committees have been a major priority of Republicans, including Speaker Richardson, during this session. Reporting from the Capitol, I'm Jesse Freeman for Lawmakers.
Thank you, Jesse. Although the Senate did not meet today, some legislative business was accomplished in a committee. A controversial bill that would require physicians to perform an ultrasound or sonogram on a pregnant woman seeking an abortion passed out of Senate committee. Lawmakers Bridget Snapp is standing by in the Senate chambers with more. Bridget.
David, Senate Bill 66 is known as the Full Disclosure Ultrasound Act. Although the measure requires the ultrasound or sonogram of the fetus, the woman seeking the abortion would only be offered the opportunity to view the results, not required to. Supporters of the bill say its purpose is to provide the woman with accurate information.
Full Disclosure Ultrasound Act will help women in Georgia to have an accurate information they deserve to make an informed consent about their pregnancy.
Those opposing the bill say that it is medically unnecessary and costly. Speaking on behalf of the Georgia Obstetrical and Gynecological Society, Dr. Carrie Swiak spoke out against the bill.
Ordering a mandate on a medically unnecessary test therefore unnecessarily increases medical costs and does not provide the benefit of increased safety to the patient. And that's the concern here.
Opponents also voiced concern that a physician who fails to meet the requirements of the bill can be prosecuted for a misdemeanor. The committee approved 2 modifications to the bill. The first was substituted language provided by author of the bill, Senator Nancy Schaefer, to make it clear that a physician who refers a woman to an abortion provider is not required to provide the woman with an ultrasound or sonogram. The committee also adopted an amendment offered by Senator Preston Smith, which says an ultrasound or sonogram is not required in the case of pregnancy that is the result of incest or rape. Senate Bill 66 will next go before the Senate Rules Committee. Reporting from the Senate chambers, I'm Bridget Snapp for Lawmakers.
Thank you, Bridget. Debating issues from incarceration to incorporation, here's a look at what happened this week in the Georgia General Assembly. On Monday, proponents of Dunwoody becoming a city won round 1 of their battle to incorporate.
DeKalb County, which currently provides municipal services, now will have a community that will take over the municipal services from the county.
When the only thing you have is a hammer, everything starts to look like a nail. And I think that's part of what we're suffering from with regard to this incorporation and municipalization fever.
Also passing the Senate Monday, a bill which prohibits registered sex offenders from taking pictures of minors.
To intentionally photograph a minor without the consent of the minor's parent or guardian took care of everybody's concern, still prevents a sexual predator from using a camera. Then they can do Photoshop. It's on the internet.
Over in the House, Representative Tim Bearden led the way to pass legislation which creates more lenient laws for gun owners who drive with firearms in their cars.
It allows a law-abiding citizen to place a firearm anywhere in the vehicle that they feel is the safest place for their personal protection or the protection of their family or passengers in that vehicle.
On Tuesday, lawmakers mourned the loss of Congressman Charlie Norwood.
But Charlie is one of the most loved people there was that you will ever know. And today, if you knew Charlie, you knew a friend.
Also on Tuesday, the Senate Public Safety and Homeland Security Committee passes a bill requiring seatbelts in pickup trucks.
Language in this bill does qualify us for $20,698,353 in federal funds that will come to our transportation department. But to me, that is not the real issue. The real issue is the hundreds of lives and the thousands of very serious injuries that this bill will save.
And on Wednesday, Senator Preston Smith introduces a bill which gives prosecutors the option of seeking life without parole in murder cases, something they currently don't have.
This gives the prosecutors an opportunity to pursue a guilty verdict and lock the person up, but not have to go through the death penalty trial phase, which, as you know, is extremely expensive and very time-consuming and often results in life without parole anyway.
I just wish we could have done that up front and we could have saved the clients 2 or 3 years of grief, because once our investigation was done and it looked grim basically for us, it was a matter of settling it. And if we could do that in a few months versus a few years, think of all the resources that'd be saved.
Also on Wednesday, a constitutional amendment that provides limitation on state government taxation and spending failed to receive a 2/3 majority to pass.
I don't want to be pouring concrete on our budget so that we lose all ability to be flexible and to meet the needs that Georgians have to get us up to being a state ready for the 21st century.
The resolution needed 38 votes to pass. It received 34. However, one Republican senator was absent. The Senate will vote to reconsider this Tuesday.
I hope the citizens let their voice be heard, that they want to vote on this. They want a chance to let their voice be known on this particular issue. It is their money, after all, and we think that's the right thing to do. So I will make that plea to my colleagues who voted against this.
Our senators and our representatives understand that we face big challenges in meeting the health needs and the education needs of Georgians. I think the people that voted today to block this Tabor amendment that failed when it was applied in California are going to vote again on Tuesday.
And that's a look back at what happened this week in the Georgia legislature.
From a cure for peach care to relief from traffic gridlock, we look back at this week under the Gold Dome with our regular contributor, Tom Crawford of CapitolImpact.com. We began with the House decision to honor Congressman Norwood.
They took up a resolution honoring Charlie Norwood for his service to the people in the 10th District. They made a few speeches in passing about his many contributions to the state, and then a lot of folks jumped on state planes and flew to Augusta for the funeral. And that pretty much wrapped up our business for the week here, I think.
The Democrats had a minor and maybe temporary victory yesterday with the Taxpayer Protection Amendment that Chip Rogers put forth, Senate Resolution 20. We may see this again on Tuesday if they get the reconsideration vote. What would this mean for Georgia?
This is a tax limitation measure that was discussed in the last session also. It basically provides that you can't increase the state budget by more than the growth in the state's population and the growth in inflation. It's intended to provide that if any excess money comes in above that, you return it to the taxpayers as a refund or you use it to pay down debt or other things. The intention of it is to keep the budget from growing too quickly. Democrats make the argument that if you pass something like that, you're tying the hands of future governors in case they have to deal with a fiscal emergency. And it was subject to quite a bit of debate yesterday in the Senate. In the end, it did not pass because it's a constitutional amendment which needs a 2/3 vote, and the Democrats banded together to vote against it. So I think it was 4 votes short of the 2/3 majority.
Another issue we saw yesterday dealing with some of the sprawl we've seen around Metro Atlanta and perhaps throughout the state as well. A couple of traffic issues being raised. Representative Chuck Martin brought in the presidents of the various chambers of commerce from around Metro Atlanta and wanted to introduce some solutions perhaps to that problem.
Chuck Martin, who is from Alpharetta, and Bob Holmes, who is from Atlanta, have both introduced very similar bills which would allow 2 or more local governments, 2 or more counties, 2 or more cities to join together and to develop a plan for dealing with traffic congestion, whether it's building more roads or widening existing roads or such as that. And then this collection of local governments would then be able to hold a referendum and let the citizens decide if they want to raise their taxes to pay for these transportation improvements. It's a recognition of the growing problem of traffic congestion, which anybody who lives in Atlanta is very well aware of. And it's the new kind of taxing solution, an innovative proposal, Chuck called it, to try to start attacking this problem because it seems to be getting worse and worse every year. So that might have some legs to it. They may be able to get it out. If not this session, maybe you vote for it next year.
Another theme in Metro Atlanta has been incorporation. We saw Sandy Springs last year. Now we're looking at Dunwoody. Senator Dan Weber had something to say about that a couple days ago, and the Senate passed that legislation and the enabling legislation for it.
That's right. The latest idea is to form a city of Dunwoody, which would take up most of the northern part of DeKalb County. It's an idea that's been kicked around for years, but now with the success of getting a city of Sandy Springs, there seems to be some more momentum for this. I know earlier in the session, House Speaker Glenn Richardson said that on these kind of municipal bills, new city bills, it would be better to wait until next year because there are a lot of tax impacts, tax consequences when you do things like this. But who knows, maybe Senator Weber's bill will get a vote in the House as well. We'll just have to wait and see.
Well, a big budgetary issue that we've been dealing with in the session this year has been Peach Care and how to close the funding gap in that. Have we made any progress in that regard?
No real progress, although the subject was raised earlier this week when Mike Leavitt, who is the Federal Secretary of Health and Human Services, was visiting Atlanta. He and Governor Perdue did a news conference together, and of course that was one of the issues that was very energetically discussed. Their statements indicated they believe that money is going to be coming forth from the federal government at some point, but the problem is nobody knows when, and we have discussed this before. Phil Gingrey, who's a congressman from Marietta, happened to be visiting the Capitol that same day, and he told the House, you know, we're going to get the money to you. Please don't think we're going to let Peach Care fail. But again, he doesn't know any more about when that might be than the rest of us do. So that's still the big mystery overhanging this session.
There were a couple of bills passed in the Senate this week dealing with immigration. Now, whether it said immigration in the bill or not, that's a different story. But what do you think about what's going on?
Well, it's part of the continuing effort by some Republicans to try to tighten up the state's borders. They are concerned that too many undocumented immigrants are coming into Georgia. They passed a fairly major immigration bill last year. This year they're going at it in small bites with several different bills. One of them passed this week by the Senate would, I think, require you to show either a state driver's license or some kind of state identification license when you apply for an auto tag. An obvious intent there to prevent an alien or an undocumented immigrant from getting car tags. The Senate then voted on another bill yesterday, I believe it was, to provide the judges and the state parole board can take into account a person's residency status when they're deciding whether to give them a probated sentence or whether to grant parole. I think the obvious goal there being perhaps to keep immigrants in prison for longer periods of time. So you're right, they don't actually say we don't like immigrants, we want to get rid of them, but again, a concern about immigration is behind each of those bills.
Those who oppose abortion have several pieces of legislation that they're pushing along as well. One of those dealing with whether or not a woman has to have a mandatory ultrasound and whether or not she may have the right to view that. That's making its way through.
That's right. That bill came out of a House committee last week, and just today the Senate Health and Human Services Committee passed out their version of basically the same bill. It requires ultrasounds to be administered whenever a woman seeks an abortion, and then she is given the option of watching the ultrasound, with the hope being that perhaps she might change her mind about having the abortion. One difference between the two bills: in the House there are no exceptions. Everyone would have to undergo the ultrasound. I believe in the Senate it was amended to provide an exception for rape and incest victims. Is that right?
That's correct.
Yeah. Fairly minor difference, but again, both of those bills are out of committee, and there's a chance they could both get a vote in the full House or Senate next week.
The legislators have 2-year terms right now, but there's something going around that would give them 4-year terms. The Speaker mentioned something about that, how he didn't think this would have a chance. What's going on with that?
Well, that is something that would require a constitutional amendment, because right now the Constitution says you can only serve 2 years before you have to go before the voters again. Periodically you hear a discussion among legislators of giving themselves 4-year terms in office because of the expense of running for re-election and all the other assorted factors. This issue came up back in the late 1970s, interestingly enough. There was a constitutional amendment that was adopted. It was put on the ballot. Speaker Tom Murphy was a big supporter of it at the time, as I recall. It went before the voters and they clobbered it. I think it lost with maybe 30% of the vote total. And I think Speaker Richardson may have been aware of that history when he was making those remarks, because that's an idea that never seems to be very popular. I think people like the idea of having their representatives come before them, be accountable every 2 years so that they can let them know what they think at the ballot box.
Well, the Joint Ethics Committee has officially dismissed a complaint against Representative Larry O'Neill for his alleged dealings with a land deal for Governor Sonny Perdue. They were saying that a lot of the evidence that was being cited in that complaint actually was drawn from media reports and that was not admissible. Does this dismissal signal anything about the work of that particular committee?
Well, the committee has been taking it pretty easy, actually, because each of the complaints that have come up this year have been given a fairly quick preliminary review, and the determination was made, as it was on this one, that there wasn't enough something there to warrant a full investigation. So we still don't know how the full review process would ever work. Again, this has become sort of a Democratic-Republican squabbling point, if you will. I'm not sure if we'll ever come up with a complaint that's clean enough to actually go through the whole process. So that's a process that's still being worked out, I think.
When Speaker Tom Murphy was in the House, the seatbelt law dealing with pickup trucks was never passed. People really were afraid to even bring it up, but now it's coming up again from Senator Don Thomas, and there's a $20 million incentive behind this.
That's right. Georgia is one of 2 states, I believe, that still does not require the occupants of pickup trucks to put on their seatbelt when they're out driving or riding in one. There is a $20.7 million federal highway safety grant at stake. Basically, if Georgia agrees to require seatbelts in pickup trucks, the state will get that federal highway safety grant, but they've got to do it by the year 2009, so the clock's ticking a little bit. That bill has come up several times in past sessions, usually dies at the committee level. Yesterday, a Senate committee did approve it. It is going to the full Senate for a vote, and I think it'll pass. Where it will run into trouble, perhaps, is in the House, where you do have a large number of representatives who are from rural areas. It's folks who live in farming communities that tend to oppose this, so there's no certainty that the bill will pass, but I think it has a better shot this year than it's ever had before.
With the little time that we have left, what has surprised you the most this session?
How slow everything's been. I'm almost going to fall asleep here if we don't start coming to life pretty soon. It's been so quiet both on the House and Senate side, so maybe they'll give us something next week that'll perk us up a little bit.
All right, Tom Crawford of CapitolImpact.com. Thanks again, Tom.
Great to be here.
Last night in our legislative scorecard for Day 20, we erroneously reported that Senate Bill 86, which would require the use of seatbelts in pickup trucks, had passed the Senate. As you heard Tom Crawford tell us, the bill received a due pass recommendation from the Senate Public Safety and Homeland Security Committee and is now in Senate rules. It has yet to come to the floor for a vote.
When severe weather strikes, weather officials say they want you to be safe. Earlier this week, Governor Sonny Perdue signed a proclamation declaring February 19th through the 23rd Severe Weather Awareness Week. Lawmakers' Alan Chen has the story.
Since 1978, Severe Weather Awareness Week has been observed to help save lives and reduce property damage during weather emergencies. In order to reduce the number of weather-related fatalities, officials urge Georgians to always be prepared with the proper equipment. Georgia Emergency Management Agency, or GEMA, recommends citizens to purchase a National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration weather radio to receive severe weather information 24 hours a day. GEMA Director Charlie English also informed the crowd on ways to prepare for severe weather using our cell phones.
The Weather Channel, some broadcast media, and your cell phone providers actually have services you can subscribe to where you will get weather warnings of your choosing delivered directly to your cell phone.
A statewide severe weather drill is scheduled for Wednesday, February 21st. Georgia institutes like schools and churches are encouraged to participate. Reporting for Lawmakers, I'm Alan Chen.
Well, today at the Capitol, legislators got a taste of Macon's musical heritage. Lawmakers' Corey Daniels has more.
The Capitol Rotunda was the place to be for Georgia high school students to showcase their musical talents.
We come every year to play. Miss Bias is the one that always sets it up for us, and we just enjoy coming up here so that the people can hear what we're doing down in Macon. I've got a great group of seniors. I'm losing 17 of them this year, and that's kind of sad. But we've all become very close. I've had them since they were in 6th grade, so they have them from 6th to 12th grade. You know, it's like losing a family member, but I'm proud of them because they're all going to college and they're going to do something with their lives. Not many of them are going into music, but music will always be a part of their lives, and I think it's made a difference in their lives.
Central High School wasn't the only high school from Macon to perform here at the Capitol today. Southwest High School also performed various selections.
Macon's got a rich musical heritage, and they're continuing that musical heritage right here today.
Representative Randall has asked us on several occasions to come up to perform during the lunch break, and we were so busy we just had to find a day, and we was excited about coming. You know, performing at the Capitol is always a pleasure for my kids, and getting a chance to travel, just kind of enjoy it.
These schools do a great job in cultivating and nurturing the arts in the schools.
Musical directors at both schools agree that performances at the Capitol are unforgettable. Reporting for Lawmakers, I'm Corey Daniels.
Lawmakers will not be seen tomorrow night because the Georgia General Assembly will be in recess. We'll return with all the latest from under the Gold Dome next Tuesday, February 20th for Legislative Day 22. Lawmakers returns next Tuesday at 7 p.m. If you have missed any part of this Lawmakers broadcast, tune in tomorrow morning when Lawmakers repeats at 5:30 a.m. Now stay tuned for Prep Sports Plus. That program is coming up next here on GPB.
And this is our broadcast for the 21st Legislative Day of the Georgia General Assembly. I'm Nwandi Lawson.
And I'm David Zelski. See you Tuesday.